Okay, welcome back. This morning, what we're going to talk about is, in our Intro to Entrepreneurship course, is market research. Up to this point, we've covered, kind of the mindset of an entrepreneur, and then last week we went over kind of business models. Today, we're going to talk to you about, okay, so you've kind of got an idea, you've decided the idea is potentially something that's worth pursuing, and you've gone ahead and built kind of your basic business model. Now we're going to talk to you about how to do the market research behind your idea to try to move the idea forward smartly. So all of these words, right? If you look at them all, this is called a wordle. And I actually worked for a company one time where the CEO was totally enthralled with these wordles and wanted one in every single presentation we did. But these are all words that kind of are around market research. They're all types of things that you might see in a market research type environment. There's a big, huge one there called focus groups, and we're going to talk about those later and why focus groups may not actually be the best way to do research, even though a lot of people rely on them. So let's watch these two little videos, and let's, start this off with a little bit of humor, but also let you know kind of the importance of market research. Okay, you can see just how absurd some of the stuff in that video was. And what it's pointing out to you is that, just like it said, hashtag life without market research, how weird some of the things might be done if we never talk to our actual customers about what they should look like. There's other reasons that you want to do market research, and it's primarily because people have different opinions. Let's take a look at this. Okay, what is that showing us? Sometimes it's showing us that some people have to be convinced. Now, the unfortunate part of that, the one doing the convincing was so intent on convincing that he ended up, getting eaten to prove his point. But the reality is, what you have to do is make sure you're doing enough research to have things that are kind of provable not only to yourself but to others, especially about your market, because we're going to be talking later on about trying to raise money for your ideas. And one of the things that is going to be critical in that is you being able to convince investors that yes, indeed, my idea or the thing I have is indeed good and there's a market for it, and then you being able to tell them why. And you don't really want to have to jump on top of the log and get eaten by the alligator to prove to the investors that yes, what you have is necessarily good. Okay, so what at its core is market research? I mean, it's a long definition, right? It's the process of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting information about a market. It's really trying to go out and figure out what is the market for the product I'm selling, and then who are the present and potential customers for this product. It's all about looking for customers, because at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. Market research drives your business strategy, and part of your business model that you worked on last week, or that we covered last week, lays out the strategy for how you're going to build your company. Remember, the whole business model is about how to put together an operation that generates profit. And so the strategy is somewhat driven very much by market research. The channels you use as you do market research and you figure out people want to buy online, that would affect your channels. Or the fact that people want a certain color, that might affect the types of partnerships that you have to have so that you can make sure you have the right colors available, etc. So your strategy determines your market segmentation, your product differentiation, and it helps answer your market size. These are all things that are extremely important, right? What am I going to do to make my product different? What segment of the market am I going after? And then how big is that market that I am trying to attack? Is the market growing? Is it small? Is it shrinking? I mean, if you think about print media, I told you guys, or maybe I haven't, but one of the companies we invested in was literally an old-fashioned printing company. All those annoying postcards you get in the mail came from one of the companies that we invested in. We invested in it knowing that the market was shrinking. There was no market growth. The market was actually shrinking, but we felt like there were still good opportunities in the market to exploit some of the changes that were being made by the post office around how you could do some direct mail campaigns. And so the market, though, was not growing. And so that's typically not good from an investment perspective. And then, do the customers need the product? Is there an actual need for the product, or is there a perceived need, meaning you perceive that they have a need? And there's a big difference between you perceiving they have a need and them giving you information that they actually have a need. That stuff all rolls in and tells you how viable is my business. Is this business concept and my business model I've developed viable? Because part of the market research you're doing is wrapped around the way you've developed your business model. Are your channels that you've picked to get into the market correct? Will people go online, or do they want to feel and touch the fabric of whatever it is that you're making from a clothing perspective? And if they want to feel and touch it, well, then maybe an online model isn't going to work. And so this is what's important. The market research is driving all of these things: the strategy, the growth, the size of your market, the need for the product, and most importantly, how viable is my business concept and how viable is my model? So what are the types of things we're researching? So we're going to research things like the characteristics of our buyers. How much do they spend? In other words, let's use a shirt. What's the typical spending amount that somebody's going to spend on a shirt? Is it $200, $100, or $50? That really will matter when you're trying to figure out pricing strategy, which is another thing we will talk about in this course, for your stuff. Where do I locate my business? Can it be virtual? Do I need to actually have physical locations? What are the needs of my target market? If my target market is I'm going to make shirts, but I'm going to make them for a business person. I'm looking for, not quite business dress where they would use it with a tie, but a very, business, what they would call business casual shirt. Does the business target market, so all of these men or women who are going to work every day and need to dress business casual, is there an actual need for another shirt type manufacturer in that space? And then who's my competitors out there? What's going on with my competitors? Let's look at shirts. Is there 50 companies doing this? Is there 100 companies doing this? How competitive is this market? And if it's very competitive, what am I doing to make myself different so that I can stand out in the market and actually have a way to kind of penetrate the market? So 2 types of research. Qualitative. Qualitative looks into the motivations behind buyers' buying habits. It's all about the motivation, the why are they doing it? Remember when we talked about the logical and the emotional? This really gets into the emotional side of why they're doing things. So why is somebody buying something? This is the motivational part that's behind it. The quantitative is all about numbers analysis. It's using very much like numbers. There are 500 homes in that geographical area. That's a number. That's quantitative. I can actually get my hands around that. There are 30,000 college students at that college, if that college is your target market. That's a number analysis. Now, the motivation behind why those college students buy something, that would take qualitative analysis. And so we're going to talk about each one of these a little bit. So a qualitative research, you can kind of almost tell it's the motivation behind, as we said, it's kind of saying, my intuition suggests, or I think that this will be the case. Whereas if you're doing quantitative research, you can actually lean on the numbers and you can say the data says, the data suggests, based on the data, there are. And so it's much more I know in quantitative research and a lot more I think in qualitative research. Both are important to have to do. So let's look at this tide box and why is it important to do both kinds of things. So what was going on is Tide, which is a Procter & Gamble company, they would do this big market survey every year. And they were talking about their packaging and they would send out a survey that was all about like, how do you like our packaging? You know, do you think it's good? How do you like the look, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they would get feedback every year saying, man, the packaging is awesome. It's so great. We love it. It's wonderful. Well, then the CEO one day is sitting in a laundromat and he's watching people take out these Tide boxes to do their laundry. And he sees them trying to open them and they're using, you know, keys from their keychain, nail files from their purse, a pen, you know, somebody had a screwdriver and he walks up and he's like, why are you guys attacking the boxes like this? It's like, you know, war with our box, you know, why are you doing that? And they're like, oh, these boxes are terrible. The packaging sucks. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And they're like, they're just too hard to open. And so what had happened was the research he had done, you know, the research that Tide had done was geared and asking kind of the wrong questions. It was all about, how do you like our packaging? In other words, how does this packaging make you feel? I mean, when you look at that, you can't almost help but feel happy. I mean, you know, it's got bright colors and circles and people were like, well, yeah, we think your packaging is great. In other words, they were asking the wrong questions. They weren't asking questions like, is our packaging easy to use? How easy to open is our packaging? And if you think about boxes now, anything you buy like a box like this, most of them now have what? Like a perforated edge, or they have like a little strip of plastic that runs through it that you pull that helps open the box. All of that came out of this kind of a Tide finding where they realized they were asking the wrong questions. And because of that, they had these wrong assumptions about how great their packaging was. And so this is why you have to use numbers with caution, because they were getting surveys back and they were able to stand and say, our data says 92% of our people love our packaging. Well, that's great. But, you know, 100% of the questions they were asking had to do with look and emotion and qualitative versus quantitative. And so make sure that you're doing both when you're doing your market research. So there's exploratory research, just kind of you're trying to define a specific problem. In other words, is there a need for more business shirts? That's kind of the product idea that we're going to try to keep and weave through most of these slides just to stay consistent. You know, is there a need? Is there a specific problem? Do we need, you know, another business shirt manufacturer? You're going to ask open-ended questions. In other words, you don't want to say yes or no questions. Do you like your business shirts? Yes. Do you feel like there is a need for another business shirt manufacturer? No, that's not helping you. You want to ask open-ended questions. How often do you shop for business clothes? What type of shopping do you do? What stores do you visit? Where do you get your product? What is the best experience you've had in finding and buying a business shirt? What is the worst experience you've had in finding and buying a business shirt? What are the things you wish were available from a business shirt perspective that are not available? And as they answer these questions, they help define your product for you. If you just go in with your idea of a product and you say, what do you think of a company that offers business shirts online you know, all buttoned down with the latest trending colors, that's not getting you what you want, because you're kind of leading the horse to the water and you're talking about your idea. And the whole goal when you're doing market research is not necessarily to talk about your idea, because you're trying to figure out the problem and then get more information around that problem. You want to do small groups of people. These are going to be lengthy answers. You're going to take a lot of notes. You're going to have to write a lot of stuff down. You're going to have to go back then and look for common threads among all of the answers that you have. Key here is you got to learn to listen. Then there's specific type things, very precise in scope. You have a specific problem. Let's say you've done all this exploratory and you've figured out, yes, indeed, people want shirts. They absolutely want more shirts. Now you've got a specific problem. You're saying, but I don't know what colors necessarily to manufacture. I can't manufacture every color on the sun. I need to come up with the top 10 colors. So this could be something where it's very specific. And you could go back to them and say, here is 20 colors of shirts. Please pick the ones you would like the best. That's very specific. You're solving a very specific problem. It can be structured. It's very formal. You can do it via a survey. You can do it however you want to do it. But that is a very specific type of market research. So there's two types: exploratory, you're trying to define a problem, and specific, where it's very precise in scope and you're trying to get to an answer to an absolute question that you have. Okay, if you look at market research from an information perspective, primary information. This is something you yourself have compiled, or you've hired the person who's compiled it for you. It's not, you know, if you were a lawyer and a court of law, you know the term hearsay, and they're always like, well, somebody told somebody who told me, and in court they call that hearsay. Yeah, in market research, that's not primary information. Compiled by yourself or hired by someone to get it for you. Secondary information is that hearsay kind of stuff we were just talking about. A report, some sort of government agency number, a trade association, anything like that is secondary information. If you went and read the census, and the census said in geography, you know, in zip code 77055, there are, you know, 300,000 families, that's secondary information. However, if you went through zip code 77055 and you went to every house in 77055 and you asked how many people live in each house, and you did this all by yourself, hey, that would be a big task, and I'm not suggesting that. But if you went and got that and it said there's 280,000, well, that's primary information now, because you've gone and done it yourself, and that's the difference between the two. So know the difference between primary and secondary. Primary, pretty reliable. You've done it yourself, or someone you've hired has done it for you. So it's more reliable because you know the inputs that went into getting the answers. You have very specific control of the inputs that went into getting you the answers. Here's a bunch of different traditional market research type things you can do. You know, there's trade associations. If you go to Wikipedia and you put in trade associations, you'll be amazed at the list of them. There's government resources like the census, third-party research, Hoover's, industrial research, educational institutions. U of H has a great library, all sorts of research available in the library. Here's some non-traditional type places you can go. You can go to like a Google Trends. All of these are hot links, by the way, if you go into the presentation, and it will take you to the actual thing. But like a Google Trend, information on what consumers are searching. You know, maybe you want to see, are people searching for business shirts? You can tell by looking at Google Trends. American Fact Finder, business dynamic statistics. This helps you see economic data on job creation, startups and shutdowns, business openings, expansions, closures. Here's a couple more. FedStats is all sorts of federal information. Claritas, if you want to understand demographic information and lifestyle habits. SurveyMonkey, that's an easy way to do surveys. Most of them cost just a little bit of money. There are some that you can do for free. Here's a couple more. Make My Persona. It's actually like if you have a buying persona that you're trying to create. There's Uber Suggest if you're trying to come up with keywords for content research. Size Up. This one helps you determine where your target customers are. It's really helpful if you're trying to determine where do I locate my business. It's a mapping tool. It tells you where your target customers are. So go in and play with these. Let me know what you think of them. But again, they're all there for you. I'm just providing them for any of you that are already deciding, I'm going to start a business, or I need some tools that are available. So I wanted to make some non-traditional and traditional ones available to you. Okay, 5 types of market research. Surveys, focus groups, personal interviews, observations, and field trials. A survey, everybody knows what a survey is. You take thousands of surveys. At the end of this course, as a matter of fact, you're going to be asked to take what? A survey. At the end of every class you take at University of Houston, they ask you to take a survey. So you know what a survey is. The key with surveys is making sure that you're using open-ended questions and that you're asking the right questions. Remember the tide example. Be really careful in the survey to make sure you're not just saying, how is our packaging, or what do you think of our packaging? Because that's almost so broad that people might just be looking at the look. If you have very specific things about, ease of use of packaging, make sure you're asking in your survey, how easy is our packaging to use on a scale of 1 to 10? What suggestion would you have to make our packaging better, etc.? Focus groups. Focus groups are notoriously unreliable. I want you to watch this little video, and it will tell you why. Well, it'll actually be funny and kind of give you an idea of why.
Before a movie is released, studios want to know what the public will think about it. So they have test screenings with a group of regular people that they call a focus group. You've all been through it, and it's not pleasant sometimes. And they ask them questions about how they feel about the movie. And oftentimes, a handful of folks will change the way that a film is finished. So this is not a new thing. Starting back in 1939, MGM not only had focus groups, but Louis B. Mayer had them filmed so he could watch them. So the Academy, this week, as you saw, they bought a pair of ruby slippers, which Tom Sherrick is wearing tonight. But we have some very rare footage of one of the very first focus groups from the classic film, The Wizard of Oz. Watch.
Oh, Auntie Em, there's no place like home.
Thank you very much. We're awfully glad you came to see us today. And so, without any further ado, how'd you like the movie, everybody?
I was somewhat perplexed. We meet these affable farmhands at the beginning of the movie, and yet they disappear. And I think that they should have incorporated those characters into the movie so that we care about them at the end.
I love the Flying Monkeys. I play sax with the Cab Calloway band, and we always have an argument as to whether or not monkeys can fly, and this proves it. If you can teach a monkey to fly, you can teach a monkey to talk. And what is a flying monkey going to say when he can talk?
Well,
I didn't get the thing with the kids.
oh, you mean the Munchkins?
And all those little kids. I didn't get it.
Those are actually not children. Those are adults, but they're...
I found them irritating.
And you hire all these children and little people when there are plenty of capable full-size men out in the bread line still.
Huh. Very interesting. And any other opinions anybody would like to...
I didn't like it till they got to the Flying Monkeys.
Uh-huh.
There's lots of ugly faces in this film, lots of elevator faces, faces that look like they were caught in an elevator, smushed together, hatchet faces, long chins. I've never seen so many unattractive people.
I would flip the whole thing. I would start the movie in color, then go to black and white, and flip it.
I didn't particularly care for the Rainbow Song.
Cut the Rainbow Song, okay?
I find some of the tunes very catchy. Oh, if dirty little monkeys fly around the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I? I feel that way too sometimes.
Is there a particular character that you would rather not see?
That's easy. Dorothy.
And the Good Witch is a cruel jokester. She should have told Dorothy hours ago that she could have clicked her heels. We'd all be home sooner, wouldn't we?
Was one green or am I nuts?
Well, thank you very much. You've been a terrific audience. And if any of you want to tell your friends, we're going to be screening another movie next week, Gone with the Wind.
I hope it has some monkeys in it.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Okay, well, clearly that is kind of meant to be a spoof on focus groups. It's actually a fairly accurate description of what happens in focus groups. If you do a focus group, sometimes what happens is people feed off of each other, and the information you get back is just so random and so all out there that it doesn't actually help you that much make decisions about what you want to do. So you have to use focus groups really, really carefully. It's much, I've got another clip there if you feel like watching it on The Simpsons. That's pretty funny, and it's kind of another focus group takeoff from one of the Simpsons shows. And I think if you click it and watch it, you'll get a chuckle out of it. But it'll also reemphasize for you the focus groups and why they're not necessarily the best places to get information from a market research perspective. Now, personal interviews are a great place to get information because you're talking one-on-one to the potential consumer. You can ask open-ended questions. You can listen to what they're saying. You can identify the things they're talking about from what types of problems they're having. And in doing so, you can then tailor your business offering much better to solve the actual consumer's problem. And so if we're using our personal shirt, like our business shirt example again, those types of questions, as I kind of referred to earlier, are things like, how often do you shop? When you shop for business clothes? What's the most annoying thing about shopping? What do you wish was available? What do you typically buy? Notice I'm not asking any questions specifically about shirts, but I know that shirts will come up in the conversation. And as they give me information, well, I typically buy slacks and shirts. Okay, do you buy them as a pair, meaning slacks and shirts together, or do you buy shirts independent? Do you buy more shirts than slacks, et cetera, et cetera? It allows you to then ask much more detailed questions and to kind of zero in on really that one individual buyer's or potential customers' needs, which is helping you firm up from a research perspective what's going on in your customer's mind, which is really what you're trying to answer. Remember, you're trying to answer your customers' questions before they ask them via the way you do your value proposition, etc. Observation happened, right? We talked about the Tide example. I mean, they had done survey after survey after survey. Procter & Gamble have the CEO sitting in a laundromat, and he's watching how people are solving the packaging problem. He's watching the people interact with the packaging, and he's realizing, wait a minute, maybe our packaging isn't so good, despite what all of our surveys and our numbers are telling us. So observation gives you much better detailed information on how people are going to interact with a product. So if you can, you absolutely want to do observation. And then we have field trials. And field trials are things you're putting your product out in the market. Maybe you're going to do an A and a B test. Do you like this better than that, et cetera. And we're going to talk about field trials in a minute and some of the good things that come out of them, and also some of the pitfalls that you have to be careful to avoid. So if you're looking as an entrepreneurial process, from an entrepreneurial company's process, what you want to do is prioritize information. What do I need to know? I've made some assumptions when I've built my business model, right? Some of the assumptions you've made might be, I'm assuming customers need more business casual shirt options. Well, if that's one of the big assumptions you're making, make sure you're prioritizing as information to find out, do customers actually need more business casual shirt options? So you have to prioritize the information that you want to learn about your market. Then you go out and you do your interviews. Do you have primary and a secondary research plan? Meaning, I'm going to do some traditional and non-traditional stuff also. I'm going to go conduct that research because now I'm trying to find out size of my market. So I'm doing interviews to find out more of that personalized information on need. And then I'm going to do some primary and secondary research to find out more on maybe how many business executives are there in Houston, or how many are in the downtown area, et cetera. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to revise my assumptions. I have all these initial observations I've gotten from my research, and now I have to go back and say, okay, wait, I've learned this information. I've learned that there are 300,000 people in downtown Houston every day. I've learned that, there are 50 competitors in the space. I've learned that most of the people like to shop online for shirts. Okay, well, based on that, now I develop another set of questions. I go out and I ask more stuff. I do more research. Then I revise my business assumptions and my initial business strategy based on all of this information I found. So if my assumption was that I'm going to sell shirts exclusively online, but after doing all of this interviewing and research, I found out that executives don't like to shop online. They want to feel the fabrics, and they would rather you come to their office. Maybe you better be developing a different type of company, something more like a Raymond James, where they actually have sales staff that come to business executives' office with fabric books, and executives look through the fabric books. They pick their fabric. They say this is how many shirts they want. Sales rep leaves. Next thing you know, these custom-made shirts that have been measured for the business executives show up at their house. Maybe that's the way you'd have to tailor your company, depending on the market research you found. Now, it may not be. The market research may say, hey, we're totally fine with shopping online. In that case, continue with your online strategy. But the goal is to validate your assumptions. What assumptions are you making? And then validate that either they're true or they're false, and then figure out what actuality is. We need to get to facts. You got to get rid of I thinks. We talk about this a lot, and get to as many I knows as possible. Okay, what types of questions should you be getting answered? We were just talking about these. Is the business concept viable? What are the major risks in it? So you've done all this research and now you've identified some risks. What information do you need to mitigate those risks? Can I do something to mitigate risks? Maybe one of the risks you figure out is, man, there's a wide variety of colors that I've found out people want. Well, maybe I can mitigate those by saying, well, wait a minute, what is the 80% of the people want? Is there some commonality? Or what does 70% of the market want? Is there some commonality where I can maybe have 5 colors that will answer 70 to 80% of the market, and then all of these ancillaries? So you got to figure out what you can do to mitigate risks. And then you have to go back and say, is my model likely to succeed? So when you're asking questions, I've kind of already covered this. Is the market real? You're going to do questions around who is my customer? What do they want to buy? When do they want to buy? What price are they willing to pay? And we've kind of been talking about this the whole way through this market research segment, right? Who is my customer? It's the business executive. Well, is it? Find out if business executives are buying their own clothes. Maybe you find out that their spouses do it, or their children do it, or they hate buying clothes. So figure out who is your customer. Figure out what they want to buy, when they want to buy. Remember those questions of how often do you shop for business shirts? If it's only once a year, well, when is that typically happening? Is it in the summer, like kids close for school, right? I mean, if you were to say to parents, when does the customer typically redo kids' school's clothing? It's almost always, kind of that August timeframe before school starts in September. And then what price are they willing to pay? Because what you're trying to do with this is figure out where and what service, what product do I need to offer? And then at what price do I need to offer it? And then how do I need to offer it? In other words, is it online? Is it in a store, et cetera? Because you're looking for revenue. Revenue comes from customers. Revenue doesn't come from your assumptions. Revenue comes from the actual customer purchasing your product. And so your job is to figure out, how do I make sure I've asked all of the right questions to figure out what will make my customer really want to buy my product based on the way I'm offering it. So that's what your market research goal is designed to do. So, is there a market here? You can't try to make your data fit an answer of yes. You have to be okay with an answer of no. Maybe there really is no market. Maybe you're going to get into it and realize, man, business executives, they're entrenched. There's 2 companies that already kind of come around to offices. The rest of them use their spouse to buy, and department stores are already offering a good thing. And there's not a need for more business casual shirts. But what I learned in my research is they wish there was more casual shirts available. Maybe you pivot your company and your business model, instead of doing business casual shirts, that you pivot to polos or something like that. So the whole point of customer research is to help you validate your business model. And you have to be okay with no's. You can't try to force the data to fit your assumptions so that you can have yeses. No's are okay. You're going to do some industry analysis. We kind of talked about this when we were talking about the example we gave earlier about buying the print shop, right? That the industry analysis we did was that the industry was shrinking, right? It was shrinking. But that didn't stop us, because it wasn't shrinking at such a level that we didn't think we could make money with the business model that we designed. But we went in knowing it was shrinking. In other words, you have to figure out, do the suppliers have all the power? If you're dependent, you're a shirt company and you're dependent on fabric, and you figure out there's only 2 fabric suppliers that actually can provide for the industry, well, then those fabric suppliers have a lot of power and will almost determine your pricing, because what you pay for your product, meaning to manufacture your shirts, your raw materials, will have a huge impact on what you actually can now price my shirts at, because you are at least going to have to cover your costs. So you have to figure out, what power do the suppliers have? How many buyers are there? We already talked about that. You've done whatever surveying, and there's 300,000 in downtown Houston, for instance, et cetera. Are there barriers to entry? You have to figure out, do I need some sort of regulatory clearance? Do I have to have some sort of license? Do I have to meet some sort of health standard or health code? You have to make sure you identify those. So you're trying to determine, again, is this industry attractive and worth pursuing? Is it attractive and worth pursuing? Do I want to get into the clothing industry, to continue with our example? And then make sure if there's something you're doing, especially on like a life sciences perspective or a drug, or you're manufacturing a product that might be used for medical, make sure you also look at the regulations around it. In other words, FDA, Food and Drug, et cetera, et cetera. Those are important to know because they can really impact your timeline. So step 3, you're going to analyze the information you got. You're going to tailor your questions. So, in the beginning, you helped, we were helping you understand your customers. We were helping you understand your competition. Now you kind of know the regulatory things you have to do. I mean, in the clothing industry, there aren't, there wouldn't be like a health code that you had to meet, but you would at least know, no, there's nothing I have to meet. But then go tailor your product or service to meet the defined marketplace demand. That's the whole point of this. It's to help you tailor what you offer. Market research is to help you tailor what you offer, not to validate your idea. It's to find out, is my idea good? Not trying to get to a yes. Maybe you'll get to a yes. Hopefully you'll get to a yes, but it's okay to get to a no. I can't say that enough. It's okay to get to a no. It's okay to have to pivot a little bit and say, well, you know what? We're not going to be able to make dress shirts, but we are going to make polos, because that's where we figured out this market research told us there was a need. So this kind of goes back to the other of people trying to make their data fit to a yes. Well, I have an idea. Now let me think how I can push it into the market. I'm going to go get some market research. I'm going to make it a yes. I'm just going to shove it in. You'd be amazed at how many people don't do any market research. They come up with an idea, they manufacture the product, and then they just push it out into the distribution channel, whatever one they've decided is the easiest for them. Whether that is they open up a retail store or they open up an online platform, but they have no idea if that's where their customers actually want to purchase the product, because they didn't do any research. They didn't take the time. They got so enamored with their idea, they thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Then they asked 4 or 5 of their friends and their family, what do you think of my idea? And they, of course, all said it was great. We've already covered that in previous lessons, why they say it's great. And then they just go shove it into the marketplace. And they don't have any idea if the actual customer thinks it's great. So remember, we are after customer information. Customers drive the train. What customers want creates revenue. Revenue is what we want to have a profitable business. And so make sure you don't just, come up with an idea and then go put it in the market. Okay, let's look at this Coke video. Sorry about that. Let me skip this ad.
Let's land on the beaches and go all the way.
This has got to be the boldest consumer product move of any kind, of any stripe.
These 2 products, Pepsi and Coke, have been going at it eyeball to eyeball. And in my view, the other guy just blinked.
The year was 1985. Coca-Cola was it. The pop of choice in a fierce cola war with rival Pepsi.
What is it?
I have no idea.
But then came April 23rd, a day that lives in history as the launch of what's been called the worst marketing disaster of all time.
Coca-Cola Company will tell a thirsty world it's putting a smoother, sweeter taste into the most instantly recognizable bottle in the world.
It was the day Coca-Cola announced New Coke.
We started producing it today.
The company's original formula, called Merchandise 7X, was so secret it was locked inside a bank vault in Atlanta. For nearly a century, it had never been dramatically changed, until New Coke came into the scene. In reality, it was a lot like Diet Coke, but sweetened with corn syrup. At first, industry experts applauded the move.
This has got to be the boldest consumer product move of any kind, of any stripe, since Eve started to hand out apples.
I believe it do for brand Coca-Cola what Diet Coca-Cola did for the diet market.
At the time, Coke was still #1, but pressure from Pepsi had cut down its market share by 2.5 percentage points.
These 2 products, Pepsi and Coke, have been going at it eyeball to eyeball. And in my view, the other guy just blinked.
Blinked it did, and in that moment, Coke was blind to what was about to happen. It forged ahead with an advertising blitz that included a pep rally video for its bottlers.
So let's let her rip. Let's land on the beaches and go all the way.
It's a kick, it's a hit, it's a Coke.
As new Coke replaced the original Coke, the soda maker suddenly had a mutiny on its hands.
I think the new Coke is too sweet. I like the old Coke better.
We're trying to start a grassroots campaign to get the old Coke back.
Can somebody out there tell me why Coke did it? Why they changed?
Coke fans revolted, and who better to explain the reaction than the late Bob Simon?
It was the people against the corporation, only in America. Coke said it was committed. So were the people. In California, they collected signatures. In Seattle, they set up a hotline.
The numbers said it all. Only 13% of soda drinkers said they liked the new drink.
Basically, there is a cadre of very loyal Coca-Cola drinkers who will only drink old Coca-Cola.
In early July, Coke showed signs of buckling. The company's president, Donald Keogh, appeared on a commercial with a promise.
We're bringing it back. The original taste of Coca-Cola returns as Coca-Cola Classic. And soon America will have a real choice. The new taste of Coke or the original taste of Coca-Cola Classic.
Gay Mullins, the head of a protest group called Old Cola Drinkers of America, declared victory.
Well, I think we've won. I think that the Coca-Cola Company, if in fact they start producing the old cola, we've won.
On July 11th, 77 days after the launch, Keogh held a press conference to officially announce the return of Original Coke and to make it clear the company had faltered.
The simple fact is that all of the time and money and skill poured into consumer research on the new Coca-Cola could not measure or reveal the depth and abiding emotional attachment to original Coca-Cola felt by so many people.
New Coke eventually fizzled out, and the Coca-Cola Company embraced the blunder. 10 years after New Coke, then Chairman Robert Goizetta said, "If we had it to do all over again, knowing what the results would be, we would do precisely the same thing." And there's something to be said about the attention the fiasco received. Once again, Bob Simon.
And before you call the company crazy, think of this. When's the last time any product has gotten this much free airtime?
Okay, so what does that Coke video tell us? Well, number one, it tells us that all of the time, all of the money, all of the skill that you can spend on market research may not actually get you to what the consumer is actually thinking. Now, Coke had done, was losing market share, right? That's what the video says. Coke is losing market share to Pepsi. And so they say, okay, we have to do something. We're losing market share. Is the reason we're losing market share because people like their product better? Do they like the taste of Pepsi better? So that's a question. They make an assumption. We assume they like the taste better because that's why we're losing market share. So they make this assumption. So I told you in market research, you go and test your assumptions. So they went out and tested their assumption. Let's go do taste tests. So they set up in shopping stores all over the country, grocery stores, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of taste tests. And they had customers come up, consumers come up and take a sip of, new Coke, a sip of Pepsi or the new Coke formula and a sip of the old Coke. And they would say, which one do you like better? And, the new Coke formula was winning kind of hands down. So everyone's like, oh, it is. This validates the reason. They like the taste better. That is why we're losing market share. So they kind of validate the assumption that the reason they're losing market share is because consumers like the taste better. That was one of their big assumptions they had. And so then they say, we're going to roll out the new Coke taste because this new Coke taste is closer to Pepsi and it's what our consumers like. However, they made a massive mistake, right? They say they made a massive mistake, but why did they make a mistake? Because they failed to understand one thing. In addition to the emotional attachment, which we've talked about previously in this class, like my emotional attachment to Dunkin' Donuts versus, a better tasting donut. I'll admit to you that Dunkin' Donuts don't taste as good, but I have this emotional attachment to them because they were such a great memory from my youth. What they did, what the Coke company did, and what they made a mistake on is, if you take a sip of something, just one sip, your palate almost always, your taste buds almost always likes the sweeter thing better. Almost always, if you take a sip. However, if you take multiple sips, sip after sip after sip, and your palate starts to kind of adjust to it, in a lot of cases, you will say, man, this is just too sweet. It's just too sweet, because it takes a minute for your palate to adjust. And so what happened was they were only giving small sips. And by giving small sips, they were naturally feeding into the bias that already exists in most people's palates of liking something sweeter. So then when they rolled it out, all the consumers were like, man, we don't like this. It's too sweet. It's way too sweet. We liked our old taste better. In addition to the emotional attachment to the old. Forgetting emotional for a minute, just think pure taste. And so Coke made a mistake, right? They didn't understand everything that they should have around how to run a taste test if you're using a sweet versus a non-sweet type option. So at the end of the day, what is the point of this? The point of this whole Coke video is to say, one, if they can get it wrong, I mean, this is Coke. They spent millions of dollars and did all sorts of research and they got it wrong. Don't stress if you get it wrong. Remember, one of the things we've talked about is go out, do the best you can. As you get more information back, which is why I've told you, as you get more information back, make sure you iterate and then go again. Iterate and go again. It's okay if your assumptions are wrong. Second, don't try to validate the assumption you have. Coke, assuming they like it sweeter because that is why we're losing market share. Well, then of course the data is supporting that, and they don't even think to say, wait, is there anything deeper behind this data? Or would there be any other reason that people like something that is more sweet? They don't want to ask that because it's already validating what they think. So just be careful that you don't kind of create your own answer that makes, that is a yes. Remember I said before, it's okay to get to a no. Now, at the end of the day, new Coke is gone, old Coke still exists, and that is actually what all of you guys have been drinking. And a lot of this happened before many of you were born, or probably most of you were born. However, I remember this very well because this whole new Coke, old Coke thing was going on during my high school years. And it was a huge deal. It was all over the press. And so, again, just be careful with the type of market research you're doing. Okay, so when you're doing market research, ways you can do it, use digital and mobile platforms. You don't have to do it just all in person. Remember, don't rely just on qualitative. You can use some quantitative. Learn how people shop, not just what they buy. It's not about, yes, they bought a shirt. It's how they bought the shirt. Did he buy it online? Did his spouse help him pick it out? How often does he do it? It's about the hows, not just the whats. And then you want to try to get that attitude to behavior linkage. Remember? So the Tide guy, right? The actual behavior, they're hacking the boxes open. You want to try to find as much as you can to figure out, yeah, we love your packaging. It's beautiful and it makes me feel good. But let's look at the actual behavior of, wow, it's really hard to open. And then you want to try to make sure all of that comes together so that you can figure out the best answers you can before you get into the market. So what to do? Use a variety of techniques. Remember, there's not just one thing that's right. Remember, customers don't always tell the truth, but even more importantly, don't realize they're not. The people in the taste test with Coke were telling the truth. They did like the small sip better. They didn't realize that they were not telling the truth. Had they gotten multiple sips, they probably would have said, we like the other one more. Context and content matter. And again, this is if you can observe something, you're going to get more reliable data than if you just, ask questions. And the Tide example is the best on that I could ever give. And then build your product, form your team, and get it in the market. And then learn from that. Throw it in the market and then continue to do research. Why are people buying? How are they buying? What are they buying? Look at all of those things and then iterate and change as you go. Remember, if it's worth doing wrong. We've talked about that numerous times in this course. This is another example of that. But try to mitigate the how much wrong. Mitigate those risks by prioritizing your largest assumptions. So build a product, form a team, get it in the market, and then learn from that. Any questions, you know how to email me. Once again, I enjoyed it. Try to have a great rest of the week. Thanks so much.